Way too early picks for the 21 NFL Draft, quarterback edition. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down a few teams here as far as who is potentially going to be looking at first-round draft picks or second-round draft picks or even further down in the draft. We're going to break down a few of the teams here. So I'm going to fly through this a little bit, not too much, but yeah, it's there's a lot of information in this. So we are looking at, here's where we're starting with, is likely to draft a quarterback after the first round. Now, these are teams that are not the guys. Okay, these, we're going to start off. This list to start with is not teams that are surefire first round. These are the guys who, you know, maybe they're getting up there, their quarterback's getting up there in age or running low on contract years left, stuff like that. So this is not the first, typically, this is not going to be first rounders for the most part. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear about that. So we're going to start off with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say when I say this is, well, they've got Jimmy G. They don't need they don't need to draft a quarterback in the next draft or in the next couple of drafts. You know, and they got C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins. Here's the reality of it, though. Jimmy G has been in San Francisco for 4 years. Yes, he's got a 20-7 win-loss record as a starter in San Francisco. Yes, he's thrown 67% completion. He's got 43 touchdowns and 23 interceptions. The downside is he's only played one full season during his 4 years. 2019 was his only 16-game season in where he led them to the Super Bowl. He missed 13 games in 2018, and already in this year, he's missed 2 games. So, where in some point do you look at it as we need to draft a quarterback to potentially supplant Jimmy Garoppolo if he has a career-ending injury? Because these injuries that he's had that pile up are not things that are going to be good on his body long term. So if he continues to have injuries, when do you pull the plug on the Jimmy Garoppolo experience and say, we're going to move on to our first-round quarterback or our second-round quarterback or our third-round quarterback that has been learning under him for the last couple of years that has also filled in quite nicely? So backups, C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins, as you've seen, they're not the answers. So you can't just say, well, we've got X, Y, and Z, when X, Y, and Z don't necessarily handle what, you know, winning. Does a C.J. Beathard win you a Super Bowl? Does a Nick Mullins win you a Super Bowl? Hell no, they don't. So you got to look at, where's this going next? Oh, and by the way, in those 4 years, he only played in 6 games in 2017, which was the year he was acquired by San Francisco from the Patriots. He played in 6 games, had 5 starts, went 5-0 that first year. The New Orleans Saints. Nolans Saints. So right now, current starting quarterback, obviously, as everybody knows, Drew Brees. Backups, Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston. Here's the facts. Drew Brees is 41 years old. 41 years old. He's not a spring chicken. He's not going to be there for another 5 to 10 years, okay? 41 years old, and they're not moving the ball as quickly as they used to. They're not a fast-scoring machine like they were in years past. They are slowed down, and they're doing a lot of gadget plays with Taysom Hill. Some work, some don't, but Drew Brees is not going to be around for another 5 years. He's actually... 2021 is the final year of his playing contract with opt-outs going forward, or actually dead-outs going forward after 21. So most likely Drew Brees will not be playing beyond the 2021 season, which is next year. Taysom Hill hasn't looked anything like starting quarterback quality. He's more a gadget gimmick guy, and they haven't really found a way to incorporate him in the offense other than taking Drew Brees, their best quarterback, off the field to run gadget plays. That's not going to work long term. So I don't believe Taysom Hill is the answer. It doesn't look that way. Is Jameis Winston a potential replacement for Drew Brees? Winston has shown that he can be a successful quarterback. Threw for 30 touchdowns last year, but he also threw 30 interceptions last year. So he can win, and maybe under in a different system or under Sean Payton, maybe he could end up taking over for Drew Brees long term. Because remember, Winston was drafted in 2015, so he still has plenty of time. So there's no reason necessarily, if you believe that Winston is the future franchise quarterback, there's no reason that he couldn't take over for Brees and be the quarterback in New Orleans for the next 10 years. But the question is, does the front office, does Sean Payton believe that Jameis Winston can take over for Drew Brees and be successful? Because they're not just going to roll over and give up and say, well, Drew Brees retired, so we're just going to settle with being 4-12 every year in the AFC South. That's not the way the New Orleans Saints operate. Detroit Lions, current starting quarterback Matthew Stafford, backups Chase Daniels and David Blau. Blau is on the practice squad, as you see there. You're going to see that PS next to the guys that are on the practice squad. This is a tough one to say because Matt Stafford is not the issue in Detroit, I want to make sure that I'm clear about this. Matthew Stafford is not the issue. Matthew Stafford's record overall is 70, 82, and 1. So he has a losing record, and it would take him, if he won every game for the rest of this season, he would still be below 500. That's the level of where, where Matt Stafford's career record has put him from playing on a team that has been predominantly bad defenses. He's put up a lot of points. As we're going to go through here, Matt Stafford's career numbers: 42,000 plus passing yards, 264 touchdowns, 137 interceptions at a 62.4% completion percentage. Okay? Easily he's still a good quarterback. If he's on a good team, he is easily a top 12 quarterback in the NFL. There is no way you can deny that, except for the fact that his coaching has been the issue for the last few years. When Jim Caldwell was there, it was better, and I've heard it straight from several former players' mouths that the Caldwell mentality and the Caldwell support in that building was massive by the players. They loved Caldwell, and they won with Caldwell. Patricia came and submarined that team, and it shows. The defense, as I mentioned, has cost him quite a few wins. His contract is through the 2022 season, so he's still got 2 additional seasons to play in Detroit, but they could potentially trade him. Plus, if they do end up firing Matt Patricia after this year or during this year, he'll have another new coach coaching him next year, and that new coach may want to move on from Matt Stafford. He may want to rebuild completely. He may want to take their fairly high draft pick and chase a young quarterback, a trainable quarterback. Now, that could mean Stafford could be on for 1 more year and then trade material from that point on. I actually saw an article today that mentioned that he could potentially end up being traded to Dallas, which I think is reaching, quite honestly. But there's a lot of things that could happen, and Detroit could be in the market for a quarterback, even if it's a later than first-round guy. Minnesota Vikings. Current starting quarterback, Kirk Cousins. Backups, Sean Mannion and Jake Browning, who's on the practice squad. Cousins. the enigma wrapped in a conundrum that is Kirk Cousins. Um, I don't hate Kirk Cousins. I'm not a massive Kirk Cousins fan. Um, I think he's a talented guy. He's got a win loss record of 19, 16, and 1 in Minnesota. So he's just a hair over 500. Now, this is just talking about his record in Minnesota and his stats in Minnesota. Since coming to the Vikings, 9,033 yards, 64 touchdowns, 23 interceptions, and completing an astonishing 69% of his passes. Okay, 69% of his passes are completed. He's got a very high percentage. And as you see, he's almost just about down to a 3-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, 64-23. Pretty damn good. Now, one of the things that I do see as being an issue with Kirk Cousins is that he is one of the most bipolar quarterbacks in the NFL today. One game, that man will throw for 250 or 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. The very next week, he'll turn around and throw for 113 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. He is as bipolar gets. And I don't want to be mean about it, but that's the reality that we live in. Now, is it all on Kirk Cousins? Absolutely not. He's had injuries to Dalvin Cook. He had last year was injury after injury after injury to his wide receivers, kind of similar to a Philadelphia Eagles type of situation. But he still has his accuracy issues. He still ends up making some bad decisions, taking some bad sacks, and so it puts him in a bad position. And I think he's going to be one of those guys that career hovers right around that 500 mark, unless he ends up on a well-coached, good defensive team after the Vikings. He also has a contract that expires after 2022 season, so he's only got 2 more years with the Vikings on contract. The next one, and I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper going forward on the next screen, but the other one that I'm looking at is the New York Jets. Current starter is Sam Darnold, backups Joe Flacco and James Morgan. James Morgan's a rookie. Sam Darnold's injured right now. Joe Flacco's going to be starting this week as he started started last week. There's been some trade talks swirling around Sam Darnold, and I think that's more because the GM and Adam Gase are in panic mode, because I believe that they feel their jobs are on the line, which they very well should be. It has been one bad decision after one bad decision on both of their parts. A mismanaged team, mismanaged roster, mismanaged play calling, mismanaged salaries. It's just they're just a cluster right now. But again, I'll get into that here in a little bit. I've got something to get a little bit deeper on. I'm going to run through these next couple that I will be addressing here going forward. The Pittsburgh Steelers, current starting quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, backups Mason Rudolph and Joshua Dobbs. Here's one I want to talk a little bit more about. The Jacksonville Jaguars, Duval. Current starting quarterback Gardner Minshew, backups Mike Glennon and Jake Luton. Now, I know a lot of people are, Minshew mania. Well, here's the reality though. Gardner Minshew is 7-10 as a starter. In his 17 starts, 4,710 yards, 31 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 63.4 completion percentage. He's good, but not blow the doors off the NFL good. Is he a guy that can carry your team? Yes or no? He's almost got a Kirk Cousins-esque bipolarness to him. He's another one of those quarterbacks that can literally throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and 0 picks one game, and then turn around and throw for 110 yards and 0 touchdowns and 5 interceptions the next game. Now, I'm not saying he's going to throw for 5, but as an example, he's that bipolarness. He also was a sixth-round pick out of Washington State. He wasn't drafted to be the franchise quarterback, and his contract is only through 2022 at a minimal cost for the team. He's on a 4-year, $2.7 million contract, so he's at low money for the team, low cost to the team. That being said, they can easily move on from a guy like Gardner Minshew and not have it affect their salary cap. They could end up drafting a top quarterback this coming draft and let him sit for the first 6 games while they figure out if they want to trade Minshew or what they want to do with him. But either way, 4 years at $2.7 million is pocket change to the Jaguar salary cap, and they can easily do whatever the heck they want with Minshew going forward, especially if they don't believe that he is the guy. And then the Dallas Cowboys. Yes, the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm going to talk about that again here in a minute on the next screen. Current starting quarterback Dak Prescott, as we all know, and he just got hurt. Backups Andy Dalton and Ben DiNucci. And as I mentioned, Dak is going to be out for the rest of the season, which puts Andy Dalton in line as starting quarterback. So, as I was mentioning, what I'm going to get into a little bit more here, jumping up. Who could jump up but the Pittsburgh Steelers? Ben has the option to retire after the 2020 season, which would be this year. 2021 is the final year of his contract, but he has an opt-out clause after this season, and he has made it very well known that he wants to retire a champion. So, if they win a Super Bowl this year, and he gets Pouncey the Super Bowl championship that he's gunning for, then you could end up seeing Ben Roethlisberger retire after this year. That puts him in a little bit of a conundrum, because team confidence in Mason Rudolph could be shaken a little bit. After Rudolph had a pretty good 2-game start to last year in place of Ben Roethlisberger, he got his ass handed to him by Earl Thomas, knocked him out mid-air. He was unconscious by the time his lifeless feet hit the ground. He has seen ghosts, to take a line from Sam Darnold, ever since. When he came back, he struggled for his first 3 games to the point that they had to bench him to put Duck Hodges back in, who then got benched for throwing 4 picks, which was the exact reason why they benched Mason Rudolph. So, could Mason Rudolph end up beating his demons, recovering from that massive shot he took from Earl Thomas that he clearly has PTSD from? Absolutely he could. Will he? We don't know. Does the front office for the Pittsburgh Steelers believe that he can? That's up to them. We don't know. The last time the Steelers took a quarterback in the first round, 2004, Ben Roethlisberger. That's the last time. Before that was, I want to say it was in the 80s. They've only taken first-round quarterbacks, I think if I remember correctly, 4, maybe 5 times in the last 80 years of the franchise. One of them actually was Len Dawson. I did not realize that Len Dawson was actually drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is pretty friggin' awesome. The New York Jets. Okay. As I mentioned, we're going to get into this a little bit deeper. Trade rumors already swirling around Sam Darnold. And as Dave just pointed out to me a little bit ago, they just cut Le'Veon Bell. Maybe in a clean-out mode. Sam Darnold is hurt. So what are they going to get from him? Do they trade him? Do they keep him on a lower-cost deal because he's on a 4-year, $30 million contract? And when I say lower cost, I mean lower cost in terms of what you pay really good starting quarterbacks. And I don't mean the Patrick Mahomeses of the world or the Carson Wentzes of the world or the Ben Roethlisbergers of the world. I mean the guys that are right about at the Andy Dalton line is what I used to call it, the league average guy. The guy who's not going to lose you games, but he's not going to win you a championship type of games. So that's about where that 4-year, $30 million contract is right around the Andy Dalton line. So the next option they have is they could cut him after this season. They could cut him after this season because he only affects $9.6 million of dead cap space if they cut him after the 2020 season, which is a massive savings to them because I think he attributes to like 17 million of it this year. Take a stop here real quick. Taylor asks, do you think with Dan Quinn getting fired that Matt Ryan will get traded or cut? That's a really good question. We're going to talk about that here in a minute as well. We've got you're getting ahead of me a little bit there, but I'm glad you brought that up. Back to the Jets. Gase likely going to get fired after the 2020 season. He's 7-14 as the Jets head coach and 30-39 overall as a head coach. So not exactly lighting up the world with his coaching prowess. And also the Jets this year are projected to be probably a top 3 pick with how bad they've been playing. They potentially are in the tank for, well, let's see, lose for Lawrence, tank for Trevor, whatever you want to call it this year. And the third team that I think could jump up and grab a quarterback in the first round that's not on my actual list, but that could, is the Dallas Cowboys. Yes, I know, but Dak's injury could force him into free agency because he is currently on the franchise tag. His franchise tag number this year is more than Sam Darnold made in his 4-year contract. He's on the hook for $30 million fully guaranteed on the franchise tag this year. So Dallas didn't want to offer him what he was asking for, and he turned down the big contract they offered him. So why would anybody think that they're going to offer him more after getting hurt? He was having a good season, but let's face it, Dallas was a one-win team. So does it make them want to chase Dak and offer him more money? Or does Dak settle, take less money, and try to play into a better contract? We don't know. I mean, a lot's going to happen over the next several months, especially as Dak rehabs. But the other thing, do the Cowboys make a trade for a quarterback? As I mentioned before, there was already some articles saying, could the Cowboys trade for somebody like a Matthew Stafford? Could it happen? Sure. Will it happen? Time will tell. Will Dak lose his job over his injury? It absolutely could happen. This would not be the first time that a quarterback has lost his job to either being a quarterback being traded in, signed on free agency, or drafted. So that's happened before. An example would be Drew Bledsoe with Tom Brady. That's a perfect example. Now, this other example with Tommy Maddox and Ben Roethlisberger was already drafted, but doesn't matter. The fact that Tommy Maddox got hurt in week 2 of the 2004 season, Ben Roethlisberger stepped in and never let go of the reins. So it definitely could happen. All right. Our first round quarterback chasers. Starting it off, Atlanta Falcons, currently sitting at 0-5. Taylor, this is where I was about to get to with your question. New head coach and GM, and Matt Ryan is underperforming. And when I say underperforming, I'll cover some stats here in a minute, but Falcons will have a new head coach and GM in 2021 for the 2021 season. The interim's handling it right now. But this will be the first new head coach Matt Ryan's had since God, I can't even think of his name now, but I think it was like 2014 or 2015 when Dan Quinn got stolen away from the Seattle Seahawks. Um, but so this will be the first new head coach he's had in a while, and GM. Matt Ryan's 0-5 as a starter this season, and since the Super Bowl loss to the Patriots, where they were up 28-3 going into the fourth quarter, the Falcons went 10-6 the following season, 7-9 in 2018, and 7-8 with Matt Ryan at starting quarterback in 2019. So really only one winning season that was following the Super Bowl loss, the embarrassing Super Bowl loss to the Patriots after holding a 25-point lead. This season, Matt Ryan in 5 games has only thrown 7 touchdowns with 3 interceptions. Now, I don't want to make it sound like Matt Ryan is the problem. I think a lot of it was absolutely was Dan Quinn, and we might see some progress get made with an interim head coach. They may throw the ball a little bit more. I don't want to blame Julio being hurt on anything because, let's face it, Julio is a top wide receiver in the NFL over the last 10 years, but he's hurt all the freaking time. I know that because he was my wide receiver in fantasy too many times where he missed 7 games or he was just hurt and couldn't play in half the game. He may have only missed 2 or 3 games in a season, but the injuries that he gets affect him all season, which then affects Matt Ryan's numbers as well. So I don't necessarily want to put all the blame on Matt Ryan and say Matt Ryan is the underperforming quarterback, but Matt Ryan has been underperforming. He hasn't thrown a touchdown in his last 3 weeks. Last 2 weeks. All 7 of his touchdowns came in the first 3 weeks. He was 0 for in the last 2 games. First round quarterback chaser number 2, the Chicago Bears. Da Bears sitting at 4-1, and I know what you're gonna say. A 4-1 team that's gonna chase a first round quarterback? Hell yeah, they are. This team literally is a stud quarterback away from walking all over the entire NFL. Their defense is playing really well, and they've got playmakers on offense. If you guys want to talk about Mitch Trubisky being a bad quarterback, he was 3-0 as a starter this year. Here's the downside to it. Nagy inherited Trubisky. Trubisky was drafted in 2017. Nagy came on in 2018. Was Trubisky Nagy's go-to guy or his preference at quarterback? Not necessarily. We don't know that. But here's the thing. Trubisky was benched after a 3-0 start. Mitch Trubisky, in the middle of Game 3, in the third quarter, was taken out after already beating 2 teams prior and, well, they were losing the second game. But Foles and Trubisky combined so far are that 4-1 record, and the one loss went under Foles against Indy. And I don't want to say that Trubisky was playing bad, but he was lackluster, we'll call it. 2.5 games, 560 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and only 59.3% completion percentage. When you fall down into the 50s, that can get you benched. Even if you're throwing, 10 touchdowns, when your completion percentage dips, that's drive killers right there. That's your third down. That's your third down sailed pass that you couldn't pick up the first down on. That can cost you games big time. Foles also played 2.5 games, 680 yards, 5 touchdowns, also 3 interceptions, 63.7 completion percentage. So really, the only leverage that Foles has on the yard or on the stats that Trubisky put up is he's thrown for 120 more yards. Not a massive amount, but the 63.7 completion percentage versus 59.3, that's first downs right there. That's converting on third. That's That's a big thing. When I said lackluster, he had a lot of drives stall. Foles has been converting those. And as I mentioned, Foles was the one loss was against the Colts in Week 4, hence the 4-1 record. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay. There's not much that I need to get into on this one. Tom Brady contract expires the end of 2021. I can't see him playing beyond 2021 unless they go just on the verge and almost win a Super Bowl. Then I could see maybe trying to go another year. But with his current backup, Blaine Gabbert, and I believe, and I didn't check, but I believe they signed Josh Rosen to their practice squad. But I don't see Bruce Arians not jumping on a first-round quarterback this year. He's got to have an answer to when Tom Brady retires. He's got to have it. He cannot count on Brady to play till he's 50. And even if he does play till he's 50, will he play at a premier level till he's 50? And obviously, if Tom Brady goes down, Blaine Gabbert is not going to win Tampa a Super Bowl. Wow, the current score is 42-16, Tennessee over Buffalo. Thank you for the update, Dave. That is hilarious. All right, and then our last team on the first round quarterback chasers, because I do believe there's going to be 4 quarterbacks going in the first round. The Washington No-Namers, currently sitting at 1-4 on the season, and I'm not trying to be mean about it, but come on, all the backlash that they were getting about the name over the last 5+ years, and you decide to pull the trigger on a name change, but don't have a name in mind. Right. That to me was redonkulous. So anyway, moving on from the no-name jokes, here's reality. Dwayne Haskins was benched after 4 games. Okay, 1-3. He won Week 1. It wasn't pretty, but they won. He threw for 939 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions with a 61% completion rating. He didn't play bad. I was not thrilled to see this move happen. I think Ron Rivera was wrong in benching him. I don't know why he did it. I haven't read an explanation. I haven't seen an explanation. I haven't heard that he gave an explanation. That team is not prepared to win now, and Haskins needed the time to adapt to his team. He didn't get it last year much, and he's under a new coach in a new system, and Ron Rivera did not give him the time of day to adjust. Whether if he thinks 4 games was enough time as a second-year quarterback who basically was playing technically in his rookie year because he didn't play much at all last year, I was not thrilled with that move. Now, one of the things I think that Ron Rivera is aiming for is moving on from Haskins. Obviously, as you saw, he went and started Kyle Allen, and he got hurt. So in came the we're going to call him the immortal Alex Smith. What a story! What a story! That was awesome to see him come back. I am now a lifelong Alex Smith fan. 17 surgeries since he got hurt in that game in 2018. That brutal, ugly hit. And it's not that it was, and I don't want to say that the player did it on purpose or maliciously or anything, but God, that looked horrible. Having him come back was fantastic. That was a storyline the NFL needed, not the Haskins being benched part, but the Alex Smith returning to an NFL field. That was fantastic, and I give him a ton of props. Now, back to Ron Rivera. I believe that Ron Rivera wants to move forward with his own quarterback, which is going to probably be who he ends up drafting. And I don't believe Haskins is his guy. And he made that pretty clear by pulling the trigger on benching Haskins so quickly. All right, so now we go top quarterbacks in the upcoming draft. These are the 4 guys that I think are going to go in the first round. It's pretty clear. And based on their talent level, I kind of put up some best fits for them. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. Obviously, as we all know, Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson. Trevor Lawrence, is a junior out of Clemson. In his time at Clemson, he's thrown for 8,085 yards, 76 touchdowns, and only 12 interceptions in his career. 8,000 yards in 3 years, okay? And technically only like 2.25, because I don't believe he played much his freshman year. 8,000 passing yards. They throw the ball a lot. Add in 788 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns on the ground, and you're looking at a guy who put up 90 touchdowns to his name at Clemson. That's a lot of damn scoring. And this year alone, he's already put up 14 touchdowns on his career numbers. So that 76 yards, or that 76 touchdowns, 10 of those were from this year. And then out of his 14 rushing touchdowns, 4 of those are from this year. So in his few games already this year, 14 touchdowns. Best fit, I believe, Tampa Bay. Throw the ball a lot. They got a lot of weapons there. You know, with the tight ends that they've got and the wide receivers they've got. That would be a great fit for the Bruce Arians offense, because Trevor Lawrence can come and slang it. Tampa Bay could make a trade to get the number 1 overall pick. It's doable. It's definitely doable. And they could end up with Trevor Lawrence. Not saying it's going to happen, but again, my best fit, my personal opinion. Number 2, Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. The Bison! Trey Lance, redshirt sophomore out of North Dakota State. 2,947 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, and 1 interception in his career at North Dakota State. Add in another 1,325 rush yards with 18 rushing touchdowns. By the way, that's 1 season at North Dakota State. Trey Lance only started 1 official season for the Bison. He played in 1 game this fall against Central Arkansas, in which he threw his first and only collegiate interception and ran for 2 touchdowns. So when you talk about 2,900 passing yards and 30 touchdowns, 28 of those passing touchdowns were in his redshirt freshman season, his 1 season. 16 rushing touchdowns that he had last season. So between his 28 passing touchdowns and his 16 rushing touchdowns, he put up 44 touchdowns just on his name. 44. Now, we were talking about Trevor Lawrence in 3 seasons putting up 76. If Trey Lance had played a full sophomore season, he would have put up 80-plus touchdowns on that pace. You want to talk about crazy numbers? Trey Lance, North Dakota State Bison. Best fit, Washington. Yep, I said it. Washington, no names. Why? Because Rivera is used to a mobile, versatile quarterback. He had Cam Newton for how many years? And not saying that Trey Lance is a Cam Newton, but Trey Lance can scramble. He can run the ball. He can run for long yardage. If anybody watched the Central Arkansas game, he scrambled and he can run for 50 yards just like that because he's quick. The guy is 6'4", and he's built, and he's athletic, and he's mobile. Crazy. He also knows what to do with limited weapons. North Dakota State doesn't churn out big wide receivers. They don't churn out big name tight ends. Now, we do have a tight end playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars right now that was elevated off the practice squad, Ben Ellefson, who was a good target for Trey Lance, but Ben Ellefson is not a massive NFL starting caliber tight end, and he could be. And I love Ben Ellefson. He's a fantastic player, but he's not the dynamic type of Jimmy Graham-esque college player. Other than that, I mean, Trey Lance had Phoenix Sproles, who is Darren Sproles' cousin. And Phoenix Sproles is, I think, going to be an NFL wide receiver, or at least drafted when he declares eligible, but he's not a typical first round 6'4", 6'3", 4.440 guy. He is a playmaker, yes, but Trey Lance is used to making things happen with limited weapons. So this is where I think he's going to fit really well in Washington. And Washington could end up with the pick in order to get Trey Lance. Justin Fields out of Ohio State. Justin Fields, junior out of Ohio State, 3,601 passing yards, 41 touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions in his career. Add in another 750 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns, and you've got a pretty damn good numbers right there. He was the backup in Georgia in 2018, and then he transferred to Ohio State after the 2018 season so that he could be the starter. And he only started one season at OSU, and then he'll obviously be playing this year as they get things going. So it could help his draft stock. It could hurt his draft stock. We'll find out. But Justin Fields, definitely a damn good quarterback if he's throwing 3,000 plus yards and 40 touchdowns in a season. Best fit? Hotlanta. Now, one of the reasons why Justin Fields is actually born in Atlanta. He's an original Georgia boy, and those Georgia folk, those Atlanta folk, love their own. That is 100% truth. They would take a guy like Justin Fields, who was born and raised in that area, and they would embrace him, and there's nothing that man could do wrong. It wouldn't matter if he threw 35 straight interceptions. They would still worship Justin Fields because he's from Georgia. He's a Big Ten quarterback, and he can play in a competitive NFC South. That's why I think he could make a good fit in Atlanta, because he's got weapons. As you saw, or as I mentioned in the stats, he can put up numbers, and having Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones would be massive for him to be able to... Man, could you imagine Justin Fields throwing to Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley? That would be crazy. And especially with no Dan Quinn as their head coach. And the number 4 quarterback I see could potentially be a first-round draft pick, Jamie Newman out of Georgia. Now, Jamie Newman's a senior, and in his collegiate career, 3,959 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, 16 career interceptions. Add in another 826 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. He played in 2017 through 2019 at Wake Forest. He just transferred to Georgia, obviously with Georgia losing their quarterback to the NFL. Transferred there for his 2020 season to help improve his draft stock, and it's going to help. I think he's, like I said, I think he's going to be a first rounder, potentially early second rounder, but he's definitely a slinger as well. Best fit here, I believe, is Chicago. And I think that reason is because I believe Chicago is going to be towards the back end of the draft. and he's proven that he can step in for an injured starter and win. When he was at Wake, the starting quarterback went down in his second season, and he took over and did very well for Wake in his second season, playing half the season as the backup quarterback taking over for a starter. Opportunity also to sit under Foles if need be, because Chicago does have a couple-year contract with Foles. So definitely could be a good fit for Chicago, because they could pick him up late first round, or potentially he could slide into the late second round even.